The Creative Recovery Network is an organisation, an advocacy organisation that works with government and communities and creatives to advocate for the really vital role of culture and the arts within the disaster management system. At the ground level, we support and mentor and encourage and link creatives and community leaders who are interested in developing work with their communities, either in preparation for or responding to disasters.
The Black Summer bushfires were the worst bushfires that are recorded in New South Wales. As an organisation, we realised that it wasn't business as usual for us, and we had to respond in some way to support our community. The beauty about the arts is that you don't need to have any particular ability or skill, cultural or religious background to participate, that it is very inclusive in that way. They're a powerful tool to bring cohesion to a community, to provide comfort.
We were seeing more and more that creatives were being placed in a position to activate creative recovery work particularly, but weren't given any professional development or understanding around managing communities' trauma, let alone their own self-care or their own facility to be able to sit and work within what is a really high-level, high-pressure place. And so we found that a lot of creatives were taking on what was resulting was a lot of burnout and a lot of vicarious trauma and a lot of disconnect and a misunderstanding as to how they could manage and sustain a kind of level of practice that they knew that was required.
A disaster can really fracture a community. There's a deep sense of loss. There's a deep sense of loss of connection and with your network. So it is really important that we have ways of bringing the community back together again to rebuild those connections. Our program equipped 40 workers with trauma-informed facilitation skills, and we were able to support 15 projects that reached over 500 people in the community.
It's been marvellous, it's so exciting to see that an organisation like Arts Mid North Coast is really embracing that, and I think you can see from the relationships they've made and the work that they're embedding, we can see that there's a long-term legacy being built here, and we can only grow upon that.
The question was what do you want to do? What can you offer? What can you offer? Because we didn't want to get people in from outside, and in fact the one time we did get someone in from outside the community to run a workshop, which we particularly wanted, after one trip in on the roads, that person said, I can't do it.
There was a range of findings. One of the big things was how important it is to work in partnership, and that the partnership working meant that there were people in community who knew the people within those communities, which meant that they could engage them way more easily than people coming in from the outside. People fed back that the actual training was a healing process in itself, because they hadn't had time to stop and reflect. And as we know, people have been through so many disasters over the last 3 years, there's not been time to draw breath and to actually process what's gone on for them. It was also found that the trauma-informed care is so important in facilitation, so that the facilitation techniques need to have a trauma-informed frame to work within.
After a disaster, there can be a lot of focus on loss, whether it's material loss or loss of the environment. So we've tried and use art as a way to reset the brain. As a facilitator, sometimes you need to tell people what's going on, for example in terms of how we're resetting your brain here. We're looking for mindfulness here.
Disaster management is the local community. They are always going to be the first port of call. So the more we can skill them up and more we can give them support and relational connections, then the better off we're going to be.
Even more important was ensuring to engage First Nations from the areas of which the disaster has happened. And we just are only just tapping into how much we can learn about how to work with disaster.
Using the legacy work of my parents of patience, awareness, balance and integration, better known as PUBI, blending Dawandi and PUBI together, I believe allows us human beings to go a bit deeper in recovering ourselves from natural disasters or mental health issues. But the creative approach to it is that you're letting something deep within your spirit come through.
So having artists trained up from the community, having mental health services, emergency services, other organisations that support after a disaster, all connected.
One of the key pieces of work that Creative Recovery Network is doing is working with a national task force to look at pathways to embed culture and the arts into policy making. If people aren't given a consistent wage, then they can't maintain. Even though the work is vital, they can't be maintained.
To engage people, there needs to be a real understanding of trauma and how it impacts community, and an ability to listen, this idea of listening, which Scotia taught very well, the Didiri, which is again a First Nations way of working, which is having that real active listening.
One of them has been an activity where we really truly listen to each other. So, engaging in those, open listening skills.
Also that there are grants available so that artists have somewhere that they can actually apply for a grant. They know there's a grant so that they can very quickly get on the ground, be in those communities and start listening to what those communities' needs are. The people put a lot of emphasis on the practical emergency response, which is essential. But next to that, we do need to remember that people have gone through some of the most horrific processes in dealing with the disaster they've been through.
Creative arts, the arts, culture, participation is so vital for how we enact in our world, but also the way that we make meaning and frame a way of engaging in these really impactful experiences of our lives, to be able to think with a sense of positive and hopeful futures, and how that we might see that these experiences that we're going through make us stronger and wiser and richer and more loving.